All right, good morning. I'm Dave Good, the Group Commander at Shaw Air Force Base, and I just want to quickly set the stage for TOC here in the 20th Fighter Wing, and then I'll hand it off to Major Stephanie July, who will walk you through the specifics. So while theory of constraints at the wing level is not the same thing as art of the possible that we use at our ALCs, it does borrow some of the same principles. So to that point, I just want to borrow some terminology from AOP's leadership model to explain sort of the high-level purpose and need for TOC at the wing level. So from a people, process, resource perspective, the level through which we have the most control and through which we think we'll see the greatest gains is the process lever, which is where TOC lies. So we're well aware that people and resources will continue to be a challenge going forward. So by focusing on improving our processes, we feel that we can have the greatest effect on readiness and sortie production. However, to make TOC effective, it can't be viewed as just another program, but really as a way of life that infiltrates everything we do. And a language through which we communicate with each other. So we are all in here at Shaw, and Stephanie's going to walk you through the specifics of how we're changing our culture here to embrace theory of constraints. All right, Stephanie, I will hand it off.
Good morning. I'm Major Stephanie July, and I'm the 55th Fighter Generation Squadron Commander. And just like Colonel Good said, I'm going to walk you through what we're doing with theory constraints here at Shaw. One of the things I like about theory of constraints, and I think why it works, is it helps to answer the why behind the how. I think too often, at least what I've seen in my career, is we focus on what we're doing, how we're doing it, and not necessarily focusing on getting to the why we are doing it. TOC is also something that applies across the board. So whether you're talking generating sorties or how you're managing as like a commander, your evals and your paperwork, it still applies. And big things about theory constraints and here at Shaw is the buy-in and the culture change. And also the challenge is the status quo. And so we'll get into some of the specifics that we're doing here at Shaw. Next slide, please. So start off by setting the stage, talking about some of the methodology, going through our flow solutions, talk some of our results, and then the next steps with TOC here at Shaw. Slide, please. So the 20th Maintenance Group, we have 5 squadrons, the 3 FGSs, EMS, and CMS. We have a TAI of 79 Block 50 F-16s. Our PAI is 24 aircraft per FGS, which here recently, a decision was made to go down to 21. So that'll be something that we factor into our calculus and may modify what we're doing here at Shaw based on our aircraft. So our typical return pattern has been a 12-10, and we have been able to sustain that. And I'll talk about some of the changes that we have implemented to help us guarantee that 12-10 to our operators. To talk a little bit about our ops tempo, so we typically have one of our fighter generation squadrons deployed each year. This means that back here at home station, we end up having just the 2 FGSs, and there's only about a 4-month period where we have all 3 full up and flying. And so it's managing those resources when we do have all 3 here. We also have a high tempo with multiple TDYs that does make it a little bit challenging when we're trying to change the culture, have the buy-in, and then factoring that into the flow solutions. Bottom line is it's very highly variable here. And that's something that we have to take into consideration when we are looking at TOC and the processes that we are putting in place. Slide, please. To give you a little bit of a timeline, so back in January 2020, the maintenance group here was selected to be one of the test beds for TOC by ACC. So in January, we had a leadership seminar where the team came in from Gold Rat Consulting and they sat down with leadership, gave us a good idea as to what the principles are and helped us look at what are our issues or our challenges here and how can TOC help. The core team was then established and they drilled into the specifics and helped develop the flow solutions that I'll go through here shortly. In February, we had our fighter generation squadron stand up. And then shortly after that, we had COVID hit. which across the Air Force, across the world, it's been very challenging. So that slowed some of our progress down. And then during this entire time, we had one of our FGSs deployed, and then they shortly returned. They returned to a different organizational structure, as well as the TOC principles that were starting to be implemented across the group. Then to make another challenge was the IMDS cloud migration. This had an impact to our data collection. So looking at our different metrics, they're not as, the integrity isn't necessarily there that we would like to be able to capture some of those improvements in our rates. Then in September, we transitioned from our core team to a sustainment team to help continue that buy-in and that culture change going forward within the maintenance group. And then shortly after, we had another FGS deploy. Then in 2021, so we worked to have a contract between the 20th Fighter Wing and Gold-Rat Consulting because a previous contract had expired, and to continue that support from Gold-Rat going forward. So that just kind of sets the timeline as to what's happening within the 20th Maintenance Group. Slide, please. Also, it's important to note that we had a lot of risk and change tolerable leadership. So changes, trying the new and different was not uncommon here at Shaw. So when TOC came on board, we were already in an environment that was accepting of change and assuming a little bit more risk than maybe we would have been in the past. So here is just a list of some of the items that as a 20th Maintenance Group we were looking at. So we have done arm, de-arm, and chocks. We removed the requirement for run screens. We've also done rapid crew swaps. So having the pilots change out at the aircraft with minimal touch time from maintenance. We've done a lot with our integrated combat turns. So refueling and loading the aircraft at the same time. And that goes into a lot of the agile ops capabilities. And we've also tried something new and different with our super fronts. So this is more from the ops perspective, where one fighter squadron has the whole first go and the other fighter squadron has the whole second go. So from a maintenance perspective, each of the FGSs is generating their 1210, but from an ops perspective, it's like an LFE in that one go, and it enables them to fly more effective sorties. We've also done a lot of changes to our phase and CAN. So phase, there's been multiple CPI events. We also made the move from EMS to the AMUs and then the FGSs with our COMO construct. Then CAN enhancement is we were already looking at ways to help with the preventative maintenance within our CAN process since the aircraft is down for a period of time. One of the big changes that we've done here at Shaw is with our annual training plan. So instead of looking at a traditional flying hour program, our ATP is built on a focus on RAP. So what is it that ops needs to meet RAP? And that's what we build our contract off of. We also incorporate a lot of quality of life changes. So reducing flying during spring break, trying to reduce flying when we know we're going to have a large move cycle, because then it's balancing the resources with our operations. Another big change we did was standing up the FGSs. So now we have a command structure. Before you'd have an AMXS that was focused on here, at least here, 3 AMUs. Now each of the FGSs is just focused on supporting that one fighter squadron. We've also dabbled in agile ops with our multi-capable airman teams and looking at, so in that team, we have engines and crew chiefs that pair up and learn each other's tasks. And we have E&E and avionics to do the same. So it's kind of in line with mech tech, which is another effort we have with how our AFSCs look. We also have done tracking of the 6 digits. So identify constraints, whether it be a particular skill set, resource, hangar space, supply, and that's something that has been an ongoing ACC effort. We've also started CBM Plus, which is still in its infancy, but we're starting to gather the data to see what parts need to be changed out at what frequency. So this just gives you an idea of what we've been doing here at Shaw and how TOC, it was easy for the concepts to roll into what we already had going on. Next slide, please. A little bit into our methodology. So really our goal is to prioritize what the customer wants. Our customer is our fighter squadrons. So it's providing them mission capable aircraft on time for what was agreed upon between ops and maintenance. And that's really what they want. So they can then execute and get the wrap they need, make sure they're CMR and ready to go. In this too, we want to make sure we're increasing our fleet health to meet that mission need, because that's going to help us sustain this effort going forward. Below is just a list of some of the principles that we've used through theory of constraints. It's the principle of flow. It's about improving that flow. So how do we generate that aircraft from start to finish with the resources that we have without increasing our work in process? Full kitting to make sure we have all the resources that we need before starting a task. Establishing those clear priorities and resource pooling, and also looking at those 5 focusing steps, which I'll go into a little bit more here in a few slides, and root cause analysis. Part of all this too is what are our measurable metrics? So initially when the team came out in January of 2020, our focus was improving our MC, our mission capable rate, our T&MCM, so our maintenance focused more on our unscheduled, since that was where we had a higher percentage, and then also on our fixed rate. We focused on some of the others, but those were the 3 primary metrics. Through time, we've refined those metrics to what we can control and also balance with what the customer wants, which is the contracted sorties. And then what we can control, which is our T&MCM, and to an extent, our T&MCS, at least given highlighting that piece, because those both flow into our MC rate. So those are changed and refined over time, and that's just because we've learned more through the application of TOC principles and then working with the GoldRat consulting team. Next slide, please. So this is just a brief look at some of those TOC principles with the ultimate goal being that focus. And with TOC, it's not about all the individual and efficiencies you can gain. It's about that whole system and what is that ultimate goal. Because if you're not gaining efficiencies in that overall goal, then those little efficiencies aren't really helping the bigger picture. So it's in looking at it holistically versus looking at individual aspects of it. And so it's improvement of that flow and having that main focus. Slide, please. And this is just a quick look at some of the flow solutions. There's probably a lot of different aspects in which we can improve, but we can't tackle them all at once. So the core team, GoldRat consulting team, when they sat down, was like, how can we improve our unit here at Shaw? And that was through deep clean. It was through cutting our work in process, our WIP, and then exploiting our constraint, which is our avionics. So I'll go in more detail on each of these in the following slides. We'll start out first with the cutting of the WIP. Slide, please. So here's our flow solution 1, our daily maintenance low WIP. So on the left there, you see kind of in a typical day, you're going to have your flyers, you're going to have broke aircraft, you're going to have PMC aircraft, and then you're going to have your major scheduled maintenance that needs to be accomplished. And I think what we tend to do in maintenance is all of this is work and we need to get it all accomplished and it needs to be done now. And our priorities tend to shift multiple times throughout the day, which then pulls people from one job to another job. And at the end of the day, we're not executing what we need to. So in applying this culture of focus and having these better priorities and understanding, it helps us to actually accomplish more and green up those aircraft in a more timely manner than what we would do previously. So overall, it's about setting that low WIP for our aircraft and only working those the active aircraft. So this is set by what production can handle, what the expediters can handle, because I mean, really, we can't ask one person to manage more than what they're capable of, because then they're going to lose oversight on that. and also managing it to our constraint, which we'll get in later. So for us, avionics. So if we have 5 aircraft that need avionics to work it, and we only have 3, then we're only working 3. The other 2 are going to sit frozen, and that is okay to have broke aircraft sit idle. And that's one of the big cultural shifts, is we don't have to be working everything all at the same time. It's make sure we're putting the resources that we have on the right aircraft, and then it's a 1 in, 1 out concept. Once they finish that, or they get to a point where now we need a part and we can't go any further, then it's okay to move on to the next aircraft. But it's not bouncing the resources around, it's keeping them on the jobs that we had already set. And the biggest change is really letting that extra capacity sit idle. So there are ways that maybe you can pull the crew chiefs over to help with pod moves to help out avionics, and that gets more into the bottleneck constraints. But really, it's okay to have aircraft, have people not doing any work, because then you're not increasing that queue in front of your constraint. Slide, please. So one of the changes that we've done here at Shaw, specifically in the maintenance group, is changing how we show our aircraft status in our morning meeting, in our production meeting. So using the terms active, frozen, and really talking through, this is what I can work or we can work at a specific time. This is an example of one of our FGSs. And you can see there in that first column, it has what the previous day's actives were. And you can see sometimes it's the same aircraft are active from day to day, and we're just keeping those resources until the aircraft is fixed. But sometimes we do have to move our resources, and that's okay. Or it's active yesterday and today it's not, as you see there in that bottom aircraft. So I like this example, not because there's a lot of red on the slide, but because it shows that we are only working those top aircraft. The difference between the A and the B. So A is active for the flight line, and B is active for back shop. So that's the differentiation there. But the rest of those aircraft, they're on the bottom half of the screen. We're not doing anything with them because at that time we did not have the resources to dedicate, and we would have been spreading ourselves too thin had we tried to work everything all at the same time. So when we're looking at our priorities, our flyers are going to be our #1 priority, because that goes back to our goal of producing sorties. So we have to make sure that those aircraft are ready to go. And then we can look at our major maintenance. So whether it be a phase or can rebuild, we're going to dedicate resources to those. And then what we have left over with our resources or capacity, then we put those on those active aircraft. So that's kind of how we go into prioritizing what we work throughout the day. And that's something that's understood from the top all the way down to the bottom. And again, that's one of the challenges, to make sure everyone is tracking that so we don't deviate from our priorities. So big thing is, it's okay to have broke aircraft sit. Slide, please. And this really goes into our challenges with ensuring that we have low WIP. Really, it gets chaotic out there. Between the flying and the fixing, we don't know what is going to break. We don't know what systems are going to break, which means we don't know which resources we are going to need in order to fix those aircraft. So it's something that we're always going back and kind of recalculating what we need to work. So it's very chaotic, but that's something that we factor into our priorities and our planning. Also, from that production standpoint, so this is where we focused a lot of our time as well, is ensuring that our production staff has a good understanding of the priorities and that they're actually accounting for our WIP limit. So whether it's driven by the aircraft that can be worked at a time, driven by the people that are available, or driven by the testers and the resources we have to fix those aircraft. And one of the things that we have experienced too is there's a lot of, we put a lot of internal pressure on ourselves, and our culture before was, if it's broken, it needs to get fixed. And so it's that shifting culture from, it's okay if we're not fixing every broke aircraft. We have a plan for it. It's just not fitting into our priority right now. And then with that, it's also that communication. So communication is one of the hardest things we do, up, down, across, and that has definitely been a challenge with ensuring that we are keeping to our low WIP. What are some solutions to this? It's identifying our proficient individuals that drive our WIP limits. So identifying how many 5, 7 levels we have in our different AFSCs or different shops, and that all gets factored into what needs to be worked, and then that helps set our WIP limits. And also visualizing our WIP capabilities. In some of our shops, we have they have boards that show what needs to be worked and what the WIP limits are. So it's a way of communicating what we can work and then what's going to be frozen. And that, again, it's okay to have things frozen. Overall benefits of decreasing our WIP and going through this slow solution is it has helped improve the focus and the communication. The changes we have done to the morning meeting help just reemphasize that that change is okay. And it's helped us with executing a plan that has been built on the actual capabilities and resources. So it's not just a plan that we're like, yep, we're just gonna fly 12 10s and we're gonna make it happen. It's really looking at what resources do we have, what constraints, and then building the plan off of that and then executing that plan. With the FGS construct, so having our sortie gen and our sortie support flights, that has also benefited us in that on the sortie gen side, that is mostly production focused and the aircraft focused. And they're the ones that are kind of driving what the WIP limits are. That's also that sortie support that has the resources that feed those capabilities and what we can actually work. So that's, again, one of the benefits that we have seen here with applying this flow solution, and then also balance with our construct interchange into wider generation squadrons. One of the challenges, though, is making sure that both sides in sortie gen and sortie support are on the same page and they understand what goes into setting the WIP and that communication piece. But it's definitely something that we've seen a lot of improvements in. All right, slide, please. Here's our flow solution 2, bundle maintenance smartly, or also known as deep clean. So we have executed our deep cleans. I didn't read that. So really with this, it's consolidating maintenance, but it's doing it in a different manner. It's taking that time period of about 24 hours and dedicating resources, pulling maintenance forward, aligning it. So we're setting down the aircraft to do the scheduled maintenance, to work DDs, to work PRDs, and then that aircraft doesn't get touched for a period of time. We have kind of gone back and forth with what that right frequency is, but right now we are targeting a 60-day look ahead. So trying to align the maintenance that within 60 days. It doesn't work very well with our hourly or cycle based scheduled maintenance, but it is still something that we've seen a lot of benefits from. It's decreased our WIP. So with that, if you go to next slide, please. So this is an example of what one of our deep clean managers has put together. So this is from the 79th FGS. So in each of the FGSs, we have our deep clean manager, and they're the ones who are building the plan. They're making sure that they are full kitting the plan to work that aircraft. And typically we'll plan to work our deep cleans Monday through Thursday. Sometimes we'll do them back to back, and sometimes we'll leave a buffer. So if it's scheduled to do a deep clean or plan to do a deep clean on Monday, then that next day we may or may not fly the aircraft just to give a little bit of buffer in case we do find something that drives an NMC condition or takes a little bit more time to get that aircraft green. So it's done a little bit differently in each of the FGSs, but I think that's what gives us strength, because we're refining that process as we go forward, and we're finding different ways of doing it. And so here in kind of the middle, you'll see kind of a score. So it has the in score, the out score, and the difference. And that's a way of kind of applying like a paint score. So based on some criteria, what does the aircraft look like based on the maintenance it has, and then what is able to be accomplished, and that drives that out score, and then there's the difference. And so this is just a way of kind of measuring fleet health in a different manner. So Tech Sergeant Eisler in the 79th FGS, he's the brain behind this slide. And then if you go to the next slide, these are some more of the Excel doc that he has put together. So it's almost looking at deep cleans like you would a phase flow. So looking at how many days since the deep clean, and then it's also looking at what have you done on the individual aircraft and what of the scheduled maintenance jobs have you pulled forward and then have you executed. At the bottom there, it highlights what the 79th does as far as prioritizing what they accomplish in a deep clean. So their priority is PRDs, then DDs, and then scheduled maintenance. If you look at the 55th FGS, it's a little bit different. We do scheduled maintenance, and then we look at our DDs and our PRDs. Again, it's dependent on what that FGS has going on and what their health of the fleet looks like. So again, different is not necessarily a bad thing. If you go to the next slide, please. So breaking down some of the challenges, solutions, and benefits of deep clean. Some of the challenges that we ran into is, I talked about at the very beginning with our ops tempo, so our TDYs, when we do surges, our exercises, not having O&M days because of readiness days, and our CAN rebuilds because our CAN and our deep clean managers tend to be the same person or they work within the same shop. It's kind of double tapping the same resources. And also the application during deployment. So that's something that we're still working through is how do we continue this in a deployed environment because the ute rate tends to be a little bit higher. And so that's something we're working through. And also higher headquarter taskings, weather, HERVACs also remove days in which you can execute a deep clean. One of the things that we're working through, and we funnel this up, is how can we better align our scheduled maintenance cycles to work with deep clean? So if we have a deep clean cycle of 60 days, but then we have some items that are due at 45, 30, it doesn't always line up. So if there's room to have them better aligned, then we're going to see more benefits from the deep cleans. So really some of the solutions is, again, like I just said, aligning the scheduled maintenance frequencies with deep cleans so we can maximize those benefits. And then finding that interval that works with enough buffer that we're able to get through all of our aircraft in that cycle time, but it isn't too long where we're now not seeing the benefits of deep clean. And really some of the benefits we get from deep clean is it decreases our WIP. We're able to focus on fleet health in a more deliberate manner. And then because it's decreased the WIP and we're looking at fleet health, it helps with the aircraft availability. So next slide, please. So this is our last flow solution that we have worked heavily here in the last year plus at Shaw, and that's Bottleneck Resources. So this is finding what your constraint is and applying those 5 focusing steps. So one is just identifying what that constraint is. For us, it's notoriously been our avionics. And from there, it's exploiting it, so maximizing the usage. So making sure that any task that can be taken off of, unburdened from that career field, that we do. And then supporting it with other resources and elevating. So once we've seen improvements there, is now investing in increasing that capacity and then looking at it again. So we have looked at our avionics and we've looked at ways to potentially offload non-value added tasks. So we've looked at having other AFSCs do some of the pod moves. We've looked into maybe having other career fields do the JSECs. So training other AFSCs to do some of their tasks. And then it's also a balancing act with the training also. So having the 5, 7 levels be the ones that set the WIP limits, and then how do we also accomplish the training by getting the 3 levels out there paired up with the 5, 7 levels. So they're also gaining that experience and training so that they are more proficient going forward. Next slide, please. So this is off the flight line, but this is a way that we have looked at another one of our constraints earlier on, which is fuels. So balancing how many crews we have available to work fuels issues with the fuels work that we have. This slide is shown in our morning meeting, and it just highlights their priorities. So it has what aircraft are broke for fuels, and they have set their priorities. So active 1, active 2, because they only have the 2 crews available, and then the rest are frozen or waiting on a part. And so this is a way to communicate what they are able to work, and they can do that work on the aircraft from start to finish and then move on to the next one. So 1 in, 1 out, they're not spreading themselves too thin, and it gives us a predictable throughput for what they're able to accomplish. So one of the benefits we've seen with looking at our constraints. You can go to the next slide, please. Some of the challenges is, in a day, we produce sorties, but there's other tasks that are also required of us. So it's taking into consideration those tasks outside of doing the flyers and fixing aircraft. And then it's also applying it across all AFSCs and resources. One of the ways we've addressed this challenge is to expand our sustainment team to include EMS, CMS, and MXO. By having them involved in the sustainment team, they can understand what the principles are, what's driving the flight line, and the flight line can understand what's driving some of their constraints. So it just helps with that communication flow and ensuring that the efficiencies that we are gaining across the board are pulling into that big picture and not basically being resources or time wasted. So again, it's that bigger system, not the individual systems within that system. And also with understanding each resource's WIP and identifying the constraints. So this also goes back to sortie gen and sortie support. So having our section chiefs really understand what drives our different resources. And that way it's a balance between the two. And it goes to the back shops as well. The benefit is, again, we're able to execute a plan that is built off our actual capabilities and resources, which is going to make us more successful in the end. And that's what's going to help us with our flow and reach our goal of producing mission capable aircraft when ops needs them. So those are our 3 flow solutions. And I'll go, next slide talks about our results. So slide, please. So looking at our key performance indicators, this is a new refinement to those goals. And I have some performance slides later on that kind of shows a little bit of our contract, what we're meeting, our M and our S rates. So just some of our accomplishments. So again, focusing on the sorties is in the 55th FGS, we did have a streak of no M&Ds for 1,800 sorties. That was not done just by maintenance. That was also working with our ops counterparts to maximize that relationship and understanding of what goes into generating the sorties and then them executing what they need to meet RAP. On our surge, so the last surge we did last month, we had no losses for maintenance. Unfortunately, we did have a bit of weather that didn't get us to a point of executing everything, but it was outside of our control with the weather. And then with super fronts, so first time we executed, we did 100% of lines met. And in other times I've executed, we have ran into weather a bit, which has not helped us. But again, it's not because of maintenance. So we've maximized what we can in that performance metric. We also have beaten attrition consistently. So if you take, even with the COVID months, we met 94% of our contracts. If you take out the 2 months where we had reduced flying, we were 106% of our contracted sorties. One of the things with the annual training plan is focusing on that quality of life. So with the ATP, with the focus on TOC, our weekend duties and 12-hour shifts become a rarity. So that has improved quality of life for our maintainers. And that's something we're still striving for, to make sure we aren't working any weekend duties. Not quite there yet, but it's been a huge improvement to what it was before. Same with the 12-hour shifts. They do really happen. One of the other areas we've applied some of our TOC concepts and flow is with our hot pits. So before, it would be maintenance would figure out what the priority was from ops. We'd be running around trying to de-arm and do the cursory on the aircraft. So one of the things we did, we had a team sit down, look at the flow, and we have now 4 spots where aircraft come up to it. So ops is driving the priority. If an aircraft comes to those spots, then the teams will de-arm, do cursory, and then it flows into where the trucks are, with that truck being the constraint. And so keeping those trucks employed and having the queue ahead of that, and then moving it through the arming process then taken off. So last time we did pits, huge improvement from what we had previously. One of the other things that we've done is change our can interval. So instead of having a jet down for around 45 days, we've extended it to 75 days, not to exceed 90. And with this, that's helped to decrease our WIP. And with our rebuild process, we just had to add a little bit more of a buffer just based on the time the aircraft has stayed down. But it's been very, very small compared to the gains that we've had by having the aircraft down longer. And not every effort that we have looked to pursue has actually gone to fruition. So one of the efforts that we have discontinued is EW shop performing JSECs. One of the things we found with that is it would require a lot more work than what the benefit would be. So for them to come out, it would require additional training on safer maintenance, how to work age, forms, and then what they were accomplishing. There wasn't the flexibility that we needed because we also have a shortage of testers from time to time. So there's just too much flexibility in that. So that's something that we have stopped doing here at Shaw. But we definitely looked at it and gave it a good effort. The next slide, please. So these next couple slides are the only ones you'll see kind of the bar graphs and the results. And so that dashed line towards the right, that's really where we kind of went into normal ops and got through kind of thrash of not flying during this beginning months of COVID. So in that, our TNMCM has been stable and trending in the correct direction. But we've also seen an increase in our TNMCS. So that's just kind of a quick look at some of our performance metrics and looking at that MC rate, but broken down into the S and M rates. Go to the next slide, please. And here's a look at our contracted sorties. So again, if our ultimate goal is to provide mission capable aircraft to our pilots so that they can fly them, then we need to see if we are meeting that contract. And again, so that dashed line is really when we went to normal ops. You see there on the bottom, the white months, so that's the time periods where we have 3 FGSs here at home station. So the flying naturally increases because we have 3 versus 2. So right now, we just have the 2 back here. And so we have been exceeding, for the most part, our contract. So we're meeting our goal. Next slide, please. Some of the next steps. So we're not done with our TOC journey. It's something that we're going to have to continue to work at because it's about creating that buy-in and that culture of TOC and applying it. One of the things that we're going to be doing to help continue TOC is to assign a full-time TOC lead. And so that would be the person who will drive all these TOC efforts and ensure that the training frequency happens when it needs to. We're also looking at expanding TOC outside of the maintenance group. So when the team comes back out here in April, they're going to be targeting LRS and OG, because they also have plays into our ultimate goal of producing sorties. And then one of the things that we are looking at applying here is aggressive ETICs with a buffer. So that's one of the next efforts we'll be doing here at Shaw. Also, some of what the sustainment team has brought up is the training aspect. And this is true for the flight line, for the back shops, is how do we, we've got influx of 3 levels, how do we ensure that we get them trained up? One of the ideas that was thrown out there was having a GITA. It's still something we need to explore. But the important thing is that the conversations are happening and ideas are flowing. We're also looking at how we view the data. So just like in the book, the goal, the metrics that they were looking at, from a corporate perspective, were not necessarily what they needed to be looking at. And so that changed what the focus areas were. Well, we're doing the same thing here in the maintenance group. So we've got a new leadership dashboard that we have in work that is almost ready for prime time, at least in an IOC perspective. And then we're looking at changing our MXG and fighter wing meetings to have them align with our TOC principles and lexicon. We're looking at new metrics, and we're also looking at having Power BI come on board. This is something that a program that Mildenhall already uses. So again, having that crosstalk and finding better ways of displaying information. To give you a quick preview of what the leadership dashboard looks like, we can go to the next slide, please. So this is a little bit of a busy slide, but there's a lot of information that is in here that's beneficial to a leader looking at this. The top portion has our flying information. So it's broken down by a week. And for here we just have the 2 FGSs, and this is in just a snapshot in time, is it has the MC rate, it has any significant events, it shows do we meet our scheduled maintenance or not, it has the fly window information or turn pattern, and then it has a new rate called the available flyer rate, which I'll show you on the next slide, as well as regen rate and what those new metrics are. We also have how many sorties were made, the code 3s, the aborts, the regen rate, and then repeat recurs. In the middle portion, that's our WIP. So it shows how many aircraft we have in MC total, PMC total, and then what that flight line active and backshop actives are, how many are frozen for supply, and then what deep cleans did we accomplish in that week. And then the bottom, second bottom portion is the aircraft overview. That's our aircraft availability in a sense. So how many aircraft are FMC assigned, how many are in depot, how many are off station, and then we also have demo here. So the aircraft come out of the FGSs in order to support the demo lines. So that's also included. And then the bottom portion is just a look at some of the resources that feed what we do on the flight line. So our pods, engines, some of those backshop produced items. Yeah, next slide, please. So on the left there is a breakdown of the 2 new rates we're looking at, and that's available flyer rate. So it's the number of scheduled prime and spare aircraft, status in a flyable condition. So how many aircraft are you going into the flying schedule with? So 15 for 12, 11 for 12, which we don't want to be in. And then the regen rate, it's similar to a fixed rate, but it includes the aborts. So of the code 3s and aborts, how many are basically available, or how many did you green up in that time period before the next fly day? So, and then the right-hand side just shows a quick snapshot on the backshop throughput and active. So it gives a leader a holistic view of trends, of capabilities, and where to kind of focus attention. So these are still in work, and we are building business rules in how to actually execute, and then also refining those 2 new metrics that we're looking at. So next slide, please. So giving you really a look at how we have implemented TOC here at Shaw, and it helps to answer the why behind the how. And it challenges what we've been doing and makes us better going forward. So it's all about that culture change, and that's what we're striving to do in refining our different processes that we have here at Shaw. So some of the POCs you can reach out to is Colonel Good, the group commander, Chief Young, our group chief, and then myself. And we can answer any questions you have, or get you to the individual who has more of the specifics and the details of these different efforts. So thank you very much.